Hello again. In the last video, we introduced you to loops, and in this video, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into loops, and they are a very powerful tool, especially when you use them with arrays, but also on their own too. So before you know it, you'll be really good at all different types of loops. Okay, so to get this video started, go ahead and right-click on your JavaScript folder and create a new file and name it moreaboutloops.html, just like this here, more-about-loops.html. Okay, and then so here's the file I've already created. I'm going to move that over to give myself more space here, and then you can go ahead and put in the starter code like that and set the title to more about loops if you want, and then we can get off and running. Okay, now to get this started, I'm actually going to steal a bit of code that's on the web page that goes with this video. So I'm going to pull that over here. And so here's the page that we're talking about, more on loops. And I want you to scroll down to, let's see, where is it? There's a section here that has an array of dog objects that might look familiar to you. There it is. Okay, so in this section here, working with arrays of objects, go ahead and copy that whole entire array that's named, the variable name is dogs, and it's got 3 dog objects inside of it. We're going to play with this in this video here. So go ahead and copy that, and then go back over to VS Code here, and we'll add a script element to the page. So we'll add it right underneath the title. There we go. And then you can paste your dog array in there. Okay, now I don't like the way that's indented, so I'm just going to indent it like that. Okay, that looks a little bit better to me. Okay, so here we go. We're going to work with this array of dog objects. And let's do this. Why don't we get a handle on the first dog in this array like so. Let's do this. Let's declare a constant here right underneath our arrays, and then we can just call it D equals dogs bracket 0. Okay, now what we've got here is our variable D, and it's set equal to this. If we resolve this expression or evaluate this expression, it would come out to be the first object in the array at index 0. So there it is. That's what dogs bracket 0 evaluates to, what I have selected right there. Okay, now what I want to do here is show you another kind of loop. There's a few other types of loops that we haven't learned about. So we learned about while loops and for loops. There's a few other types of loops, and we won't cover them all, but we'll just we'll get into a few of them here. So I want to show you that you can loop through all the properties in an object. Or if you remember, some people call the properties, they call them keys. So keep that in mind. You'll see that come into play here. So here's what this loop looks like. You start out with for, and then a pair of parentheses and a pair of curly braces. And then split the curly braces apart, set the table, and then what goes inside the parentheses is different than the for loop that you learned about in the last video. What we do here is you declare a variable that's going to represent the current property or the current key in the object that you want to loop through. So here what I'll do is I'll use key, but you could use prop or property or something like that, but a lot of people call these key value pairs or property value pairs. That's what an object is made up of. Let me know if you want to talk about that in class. Okay, so you declare a variable, and that's actually going to represent the current property in the loop. Okay, and then you type in this keyword in. So there's another keyword that we haven't seen yet, the in keyword, and then the name of the variable that you want to loop through. In this case, we just have our dog stored in that D variable. Okay, so there's what it looks like. So as we loop, this variable right here is going to be the current key or the current property name. So the first time through the loop, it's going to be name. The second time, it's going to be breed, and then gender, then age. You'll see how this works here. So inside the body of the loop, let's just console log the key. So I'm going to type in a string that says key, and if you want, you can put in parentheses property name because it means the same thing here. And then what I'll do is I'll concatenate that key variable. Okay, go ahead and type that in and save this, and then open this page in the browser. And mine's coming up over here. I'll pull it up over here and then hit F12. Okay, and now look at what we get. So there's, we get name, breed, gender, age, and vaccinated. So those are all the property names that are in this dog object that we're storing in our variable D. Now, I didn't really need this line. I didn't need the variable D. I guess I could just comment this out, and then what I would do here is I could do dogs bracket 0 like that. That would be the same thing, because basically, you know, I was kind of thinking that it might be clever to just pull it out and have a variable called D. That's short and easy to work with, but this also works here too. You just have to figure out what that expression results in. Dogs bracket 0 results in this object right there, and if we were using D, that would have resulted in the same thing here too. Okay, so there's how you can get all the keys or the property names out of an object. Once you have the key, you can also get the value. So let me show you what I mean. And actually, I think what I do want to do is go back to my D variable here. So I'm going to uncomment this line. I'm waffling a little bit, sorry about that. And then inside of our loop parentheses here, let's just go with for let key in D, like that. Okay, so now inside the body of the loop, I want to show you that if you've got the key, then you can get the value like this. So here, put a console log, and then we'll log the string. We'll say, make it say value, like that. And then what we'll concatenate onto that string is this. We've got our D variable, that's our dog object, and we can do square brackets and then put the key in there, and that will, if you think about this, this is like using bracket notation here. So let me just evaluate what we have in the brackets here. The first time through the loop, that key is going to be the string name. So if I were to evaluate key right there, and I'm in the first trip through the loop here, that would evaluate to that, the string name like that. So there we'd be using bracket notation to access the property of an object. Okay, now I'm going to undo that because this is how I want you to have your code. So key is going to be storing a string. It's going to be the name of the current property or the name of the current key. So that would evaluate to the string name, and you saw what I just did there inside the brackets to kind of figure that out. All right, go ahead and save that, and then Alt-Tab back to the browser here and reload the page. And now what you should see, there we go, there's breed, the key name or the property name is breed, the value is boxer, and so on and so forth. Okay, so there is another kind of loop that allows you to loop through the properties or the keys in an object. Okay, the next thing I want to show you, I'm going to go ahead and clear this and then go back to VS Code, is that strings are actually arrays. So here, let's go ahead and declare a string. I'll use const and I'll just call it str, which is short for string, and I'll just make it say hi, like that, with an exclamation mark, something real quick and simple. Okay, so now this is interesting. Strings are actually arrays. So what this is it's an array with 3 elements in it. Each element is a character. So the first element is a capital H, the second one is a lowercase I, and the third one is an exclamation mark. So interesting, strings are actually a type of array. They're also a type of object, as we'll learn in the next course here too. But let me show you what I mean here. You know that arrays have a length property. So here, if I'm going to do a console log, and let's do str.length. And it should give us 3 because there's 3 characters in that string. So every character in a string is an element, and the string is an array. If I save this, and then go back over here and refresh. There we go. It says the length of the array is 3. Okay, now that you know that strings are arrays, you can loop through them just like you would loop through any other array. So here, let's write a loop that loops through every character in this string here. We're going to use a for loop because for loops are really great for looping through arrays, as we saw in the last video. So type in for, pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, split the curlies apart. This is what I call setting the table. And now we can fill in the details inside the parentheses. The first thing is we need a counter variable. We'll use x, I guess. Let x equal 0, and we want to set that counter variable to 0 because we want to start with the first index number in the array. So we're going to start our counter variable at 0, and we're going to loop while x is less than the length of the array that we're looping through. So we can use that length property. So we type in let x is less than str.length, like that, and then a semicolon. And then finally, we want to increment our counter variable by 1 at the end of each loop. So we do I++. Okay, here, now let's do this. Remember I told you I want you to know what the current element means. Let's get the current element out of this loop here. Let's do this. We'll declare a constant and we'll just call it current. Okay, and then to get the current element in the loop, we do this. We set it equal to the array that we're looping through, and then we use bracket notation, and then inside the brackets we put our counter variable. So if x evaluates to 0, then this would become str bracket 0, and that would give us the capital H right here. Okay, let's go ahead and console log the current here. So we'll go console.log, and we'll console log current, and then we'll concatenate onto current. We'll do plus, and then we'll say is at index, and then I'll concatenate again. So pay attention, there's a lot of quotation marks and plus signs when you're concatenating like this. And here, let's put our counter variable. Now, I made an error here and I wasn't paying attention. Look at I used I here, and it should have been X. So I think my web page that goes with this video, I used I, but here I used X instead. So be careful. Don't make that mistake. I had the wrong variable there for our incrementer. Okay, if we go ahead and save this and then go back over to the browser and reload the page, there we go. We get H is at index 0, I is at index 1, and the exclamation mark is at index 2. Alrighty. Okay, so this is kind of like a whirlwind tour of things you can do with loops, and we'll be digging into these things more in the next class here. So in the last video, we figured out our total tips for our daily tips that we were collecting. I want to use that array again, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste it in here. You can go ahead and type that in, but we declared a variable called daily tips, and we made it an array because you see the square brackets there. And then these are the numbers that we put into it: 40, 80, 107, 92, and 77. If we all stick with those same exact numbers, we should get the same exact results here. So what we did in the last lesson is we declared a variable with let, and we called it total tips like this. And then we set it equal to 0. And then if you remember, you saw how we figured out the total tips. We're going to repeat that here just for practice. And by the way, I think what I'll do, I'm going to put a few more line carriages here just to separate these examples out a little bit. So you don't have to do that. That's just me. But I'm just putting in a few extra line breaks so I know where one example ends and another one begins here. Okay, so right here, let's go ahead and loop through the daily tips array. So we'll go for, and then let x equals 0. And look at, I forgot to set the table this time. That's okay, you don't always have to set the table. Here we're going to do x is less than daily tips dot length, and then a semicolon, and then x plus plus, like that, and then a pair of curly braces. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's declare a variable called current. I'll use const to do that, and we'll just set current equal to daily tips bracket x. Okay, so that'll give us the current element. Daily tips bracket x will evaluate to the current element. If you don't know what I mean by current element, ask me in class and we'll talk about it, but I want you to understand what I mean. That means that the current element in the array that we're looping through in each iteration. So the first iteration, x is going to be 0. So daily tips bracket 0 would evaluate to 40. That's the current value that we're working on, current element. Okay, alrighty. Now let's do this. So we figured out how to calculate the total. So what we did here is we took the total tips, and now remember we used let when we declared that because we're going to reassign it a new value with plus equals here. So here we'll add current like that. What we're also going to do is we're going to, you can figure out the min and the max, and I'll show you how in just a second here. So after the loop here, let's just go ahead and console log the total. Like this, we'll do total, and then I'll concatenate the total tips variable like that. Okay, but let's check that here and make sure I don't have any mistakes. I'm going to save it and then reload it in the browser here. Okay, total is 396. I think that's what we got last time. If I go back here, now I want to show you how you can figure out the max. So what we're going to do here is before the loop, let's declare a variable, and we'll use let, and we'll name the variable max, and we'll just initialize that to 0. Okay, so what we're going to do is inside the body of the loop, we're going to check to see if the current value is higher than the max. If it is, then we're going to use that to reassign max. Let me show you what I mean here. So here at the last line of code before the body of the loop ends is we're going to do an if statement. So set up an if statement. It's going to be an if statement that's nested inside of our for loop. So here I'm setting the table, if para parentheses, para curly braces, and then I'm going to split the curlies apart like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if the current is greater than the max, then we have a new max. So inside the body of the if statement there, we're going to go max is equal to the current. One of my students once said, this is like king of the hill. So what happens is you loop through the array, and if you find that the current value is higher than the max, then that becomes the new king of the hill. And by the time you're done with the loop, you're going to have the maximum value in the entire array. Let's see if that works here. So go back to underneath the loop here, underneath this console log, we'll add another one here. We'll do a console.log, and we can do max, colon, space, and then we'll concatenate max here. Okay, before I run this, I'm just going to look at the array here. So it looks like 107 is the max value. Let's see if that's what we get here. So I'm going to save this and then go back over to the browser and reload. There we go. Our max is 107. Okay. Now you can also figure out the min. That's a little bit more tricky, but should we do it or should we not do it? I suppose we might as well do it here. So I'm going to go back over to VS Code. And to figure out the min, what we'll do here is we'll do up here before the loop, we'll declare a variable and we'll call it min like that. And here what we're going to do now, what do we want to initialize this to? This can be tricky. Do you just initialize it to 7 billion or something and hope that none of the variables inside your array are more than that? Well, there's a better way to do this. We can initialize it to the first element in the array. So we'll do daily tips square bracket 0. Okay, so that's a good trick. Now, if we were just figuring out the min and we did this, then we could technically start our loop at 1. But I want to start x at 0 here because we're figuring out other stuff where we need x to be 0. But if all we were doing was figuring out the min, we could skip the first loop and start x at 1. Let me know if you have any questions about that. Okay, anyways, I'm going to go down to the body of the for loop right underneath our if statement here. By the way, I think maybe I'll put some line breaks in here just to give it some breathing room and maybe make it more readable. But I'm going to add another if statement that does this. If, and then pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, and then split the curlies apart like that. And then here we'll say if the current is less than whatever we're storing in min, then we're going to set the min to whatever current is. So we'll do min equals current. Now, if this is hard for you to wrap your head around, and I could see how it could be because we just started working on loops and stuff, then I recommend that you step through this for loop with the debugger and keep an eye on these variables, current, max, and min, and you can watch how they change as the loop, or don't change as the loop iterates, because they may not change. So in a single iteration, they could stay the same depending on what the variables are. All right, so down here, I'm going to scroll down. I wish I could fit all this in here. There's the whole loop right there. I'm going to scroll down here, and I'm going to do Alt-Shift-Down arrow to duplicate that console log, and then I'm going to do min like that, and then change that to min, and then change this to min here, and save it. And now I'm going to scroll back up and just check. So it looks like 40 is the minimum value. Let's see if that's what our program gives us. Notice how we're figuring out what we expect to see in the output, and if we get what we expect, then we think it works. If we don't get what we expect, then we think there's something wrong and we need to debug. Okay, save it, go back over to the browser, reload the page. Okay, so that's what we got, what we expected, 40 for the min. Alrighty, here we go. Now we're gonna begin, I'm scrolling up here, we're gonna begin to start working with this array again. So for the last few examples, we're gonna be working with our dogs array that we put at the top of our script here. So I'm gonna scroll back down. If you want, you can add comments in here to remind yourself of what's going on. That's not a bad idea. All right, so here, so if you wanted to add a comment, what we're going to talk about here is searching for elements in an array, like that. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. Let's do this. Let's prompt the user for some input. So I'm going to declare a variable with const, and we'll just call it input, and we'll set that equal to, we'll call the prompt function here. So we'll call the prompt function. I'm going to set that up, and then move my cursor in between the parentheses and add a string parameter that says enter the name of a dog. Oops. Of a dog, just like that. All right, and then I'm going to do a for loop here. So good practice with for loops here today. Set the table with for, pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, split the curlies, and then move your cursor into the parentheses. We'll declare a counter variable and initialize it to 0. So I'll do let x equals 0 semicolon, and then we're going to loop while x is less than the length of the array. So that's going to be x is less than dogs.length, semicolon, and then we want to increment x by 1, so I'll do x plus plus. Okay, and now we're ready to start working on the body of the loop here. And let's do this. Let's go const d equals dogs bracket x. So that's going to give us the current element, or the current dog that we're looping through. Okay. Now, by the way, I do have a variable called d that I declared up above, but that's in a different scope here. Interesting. This variable d here, it only lives within the block that it's declared. So this variable d is actually not the same variable d that we declared up above, because it's declared in a different block, or it has a different scope. Boy, that's something that we could talk about in class. But anyways, we're going to store the current dog in our loop is going to be stored in this variable d right here. And what we want to do is check its name to see if it's the same as what the our user entered into the prompt here. So right there, after that line, we'll go ahead and we'll do an if statement. If, pair parentheses, pair curly braces, split them curlies apart. Okay, notice I'm trying to keep my indentation nice and neat right here. Now I'm going to move my cursor in between the parentheses, and we're going to put our Boolean expression in here. And we're going to go if d.name, if the current dog's name is equal to what the user input, then we found the dog we're looking for. So inside the body of the if statement right here, we can do console log, and we'll say, let's do this, d.name, and we'll concatenate this string onto d.name. We'll say inside the quotation marks here, we'll say is at index, and then I'm going to put another space, and then I'll concatenate our counter variable there. Okay, and for the heck of it, if you want to see all the details of the dog that you're looking for, we could console log d. So here on the next line, let's console log d, whoops, like that. And then you can see all the details of this dog that you were looking for. And then finally, we'll probably want to break out of the loop because we found the dog we're looking for. Okay, so I'm going to use a break statement right there. And if you found what you're looking for, and you're done, then you can break out of the loop. Okay, now you might be wondering what happens if there's two dogs with the same name. Okay, interesting. That's a problem we can talk about in class, because you won't know which dog they're referring to when they type in the dog's name. Okay, anyways, let's try this out here. Save the changes, go back over to the browser, reload the page here, and we should see our prompt. Enter the name of a dog. Let's see, do we have, we have Daisy. Let's enter Daisy. And I expect to see something here. What's in the console log? Whoops, did I spell Daisy wrong? Let me try that again. Maybe I spelled Daisy wrong. Okay, enter the name of the dog. What do I have in here? D-A-I-S-Y. Okay, I must have typed it in wrong before. It says Daisy is at index 2, and here are all the details of Daisy. Okay, now notice what our code does. If we don't find the dog, it just loops through all the dogs, and then it doesn't do anything. In class, we can talk about ways you could deal with this, because it's kind of confusing for a user if they don't get any output. There should be something that says, no, we didn't find that dog, so that the user knows that the dog doesn't exist. Instead, we're leaving the user hanging. If they search for a dog that doesn't exist in our dogs array, we're not telling them anything. So they might sit there and wait, and they'll go, oh, is it still looking for the dog, or what's going on here? Anyways, a lot of details that we can worry about later in the program. Alrighty. Okay, so I've got one more example here. We could go on and on here, but this is going to be a little bit interesting. Let's say you have an array of dog objects like we have. We only have 3 dog objects, but in a real program, maybe you'd have an array that has thousands or maybe even millions of dog objects. So it could be like a dog database for all the dogs in your whole entire state or something like that. And you want to find out how many have been vaccinated. So here's what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and loop through the dogs array again. So right there, I'm going to start a new loop right after the last one. And it's going to look a lot like the previous one because we're going to loop through the same array. But we need practice with loops here. So let's set the table for pair parentheses, pair curly braces, split the curlies apart like that. Move your cursor back into the parentheses and then declare a counter variable. Let's use x and set it equal to 0. And then semicolon. Okay, after that, we're going to loop while x is less than the length of the array. So we do x is less than dogs dot length like that, and then semicolon. And then we're going to loop by 1. So we do x plus plus right here, and there we go. I've set up the loop, and we're ready to start working inside the body. Okay, now before we do, let's actually declare a variable before the loop. So put your cursor right up there. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And before the loop that we just wrote, let's declare a variable, and we'll call it number of vaxxed dogs. And then we'll initialize it to 0. You could actually call that variable whatever you want, but I called it number of vaxxed dogs, and I left it camel case. and we'll use that to keep a running total of the dogs that we come across inside of our loop that have been vaccinated. Okay, so here inside the body of our loop, we want to have an if statement. We want to know if the dog is vaccinated or not. So here inside the loop, I'll set up an if statement. If, pair of parentheses, pair of curly braces, split the curlies apart, and now put your cursor in between the parentheses for our Boolean expression. And we're going to do, I guess I didn't use a variable for the current dog, so I'll just use bracket notation like so. I'll do if dogs square bracket x dot vaccinated is double equal to true, then we found another dog that's been vaccinated, and we can bump up our number of vaxxed dogs variable like this. Number of vaxxed dogs plus plus. Okay, so by the time this loop is done, we should have a tally of all the dogs that have been vaccinated. All right, now I want to show you something. You could do what I did here for our Boolean expression, but if you scroll up and look at each of the dog objects, you'll see that, oh, I got to go way up here to get there. Vaccinated is a Boolean. It's either true or false. So let's just say that our current dog back down here in our loop, we'll say that our current dog, whoops, this loop right here, let's just say that the current dog is vaccinated. So if I evaluate this expression that I have selected right here, I'd end up with true equals true. Okay, and true is equal to true. That's true, so the whole thing would end up being true, and then we dive in to the if statement right there like that. Okay, so to abbreviate this, I'm going to do Control Z like that. I could leave it as it is, that's no problem, but the other thing that I could do is, since it's a Boolean variable, and by that I mean the vaccinated property is a Boolean, it's either true or false, I can just leave it like that. So if vaccinated is true, then we'll dive into the code block here, and it'll increment the number of vaxxed dogs here. Okay, let's, after the loop here, let's go ahead and console log this. Number of vaxxed dogs, and then I will concatenate our variable, plus number of vaxxed dogs like that. Okay, now before we run this, let's go scroll back up to the array and take a look at it and see what we expect to see when our code runs here. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then scroll back up to the top. Let's have a look at it. Let's see, so here it looks like 2 of the dogs have been vaccinated. Okay, so we expect to see 2 when we run this. Let's see if that's true here. There we go, reload. Oh, I gotta enter the name of a dog, Brutus. Now this isn't gonna find anything because I spelled it wrong, but there we go, that lets us move on, and number of vaxxed dog is 2, and that's what we were hoping for and expected, so it seems like our program's working. Okay, now, so you're getting a little bit of exercise in data analytics here, like processing collections of data, which are in the form of arrays here, and trying to, aggregate things like get the number of vaccinated dogs. So we could do all kinds of interesting experiments here. How about, could you figure out the average age of all dogs? We could do that. I think we have the skills to do that right now. How about how many male dogs have been vaccinated? I think we could do that too. Maybe we'll do these in class. How about this? How many dogs under the age of 5 have been vaccinated? So it's interesting, now that you know how to loop through arrays of objects, you can do a lot of number crunching and data analytics on it, which is a big field, by the way. It's a hot topic. So data analytics is big. Okay, that's going to do it. So we just need to practice loops a lot, and you'll see as we move forward in the program that there's all kinds of interesting use cases for loops and arrays.